brothers and sisters, today we gather around a truth that too many people have forgotten. You were not created to live timidly. You were not made to walk through life doubting every step. You were not born to surrender your mind, your voice, your conviction, or your calling. You were born with something sacred inside of you, the ability to stand, decide, lead, and move forward in faith. And today's message is this: faith that frees begins when you trust yourself to lead. Not selfishly, not arrogantly, not recklessly, but faithfully, responsibly, courageously. Because if God, truth, destiny, and freedom placed a purpose in you, then living in fear of your own power is not humility. It is hesitation in the face of your calling. Freedom begins within. Many people speak of freedom as something external. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom from tyranny, freedom from oppression. And all of those freedoms matter deeply. But there is another kind of freedom, a deeper kind, a freedom that must exist inside a person before it can ever exist in a nation. That freedom is this: the freedom to trust your own conscience, the freedom to trust your own discernment, the freedom to trust the voice of truth within you. Because a person can live in a free country and still be mentally imprisoned. A person can have rights on paper and still live like a slave to fear. A person can be surrounded by opportunity and still remain trapped by self-doubt. And that is why some of the strongest chains in this world are invisible. They are the chains of fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of standing alone, fear of making the wrong move, fear of becoming fully responsible for your life. And until those chains are broken, a person may be alive, but they are not yet free. Faith breaks those chains, not because faith removes every uncertainty, but because faith teaches you to move even when certainty is absent. That is freedom. Faith is not passive. One of the greatest misunderstandings about faith is this: people think faith means waiting. Waiting for a sign, waiting for rescue, waiting for certainty, waiting for someone wiser, stronger, richer, louder, or more qualified to arrive and take charge. But real faith is not passive. Real faith moves. Real faith builds. Real faith decides. Real faith acts. Faith is not sitting still and hoping life improves. Faith is standing up and saying, I may not know every answer, but I know enough to take the next step. That is leadership. Leadership does not always begin with a title. It does not begin with applause. It does not begin when the crowd agrees. Leadership begins the moment a person says, I will not abandon my responsibility. That is what faith does. Faith turns spectators into builders. Faith turns fear into motion. Faith turns hesitation into duty. And that is why faith is freeing. Because it releases you from the prison of waiting for someone else to become who you were meant to be. Trusting yourself is not ego, it is stewardship. Now, let us be clear. When we say trust yourself, we do not mean worship yourself. We do not mean that your emotions are always right. We do not mean that your impulses should rule your life. We do not mean pride, vanity, or rebellion. That is not freedom. That is chaos. What we mean is this: trust the mind you were given. Trust the conscience you have developed. Trust the strength forged through hardship. Trust the wisdom earned through pain. Trust the lessons that life has already taught you. Because too many people spend their lives doubting what experience has already prepared them to do. You have survived storms. You have endured setbacks. You have seen betrayal. You have carried burdens. You have made mistakes and learned from them. You have stood back up when life tried to knock you flat. So why, after all of that, would you believe you are incapable of leading? You've already been in training. Every hardship was forming judgment. Every trial was building endurance. Every setback was sharpening discernment. You're not beginning from nothing. You are standing on a foundation built by every battle you have survived. And trusting that is not ego, it is stewardship. It is honoring what has already been forged in you. The world trains people to doubt themselves. Let's speak plainly. There are systems in this world that benefit from weak people. Not weak in body, but weak in conviction. Because a person who does not trust themselves is easier to control. If you doubt your own judgment, someone else will gladly think for you. If you fear your own voice, someone else will gladly speak over you. If you do not trust your own calling, someone else will assign you a smaller life. And that is why one of the most revolutionary acts a person can commit is this: to become inwardly free, to say, I will think, I will discern, I will stand, I will decide, I will lead my life with courage and responsibility. That is not rebellion against truth. That is alignment with truth. Because freedom has always required people who are willing to govern themselves before they ever try to influence the world around them. A nation cannot remain free if its people are inwardly dependent, morally confused, and afraid to stand alone. And neither can a family, neither can a community, neither can a church, neither can a life. Freedom requires inner leadership, and inner leadership begins with faith. You do not need to feel ready to be called. One of the lies people believe is, when I feel ready, then I will lead. But readiness is often a myth. Most people do not feel ready when the moment comes. Parents do not always feel ready. Leaders do not always feel ready. Builders do not always feel ready. Protectors do not always feel ready. Visionaries do not always feel ready. And yet history has always moved forward because ordinary people answered extraordinary moments before they felt fully prepared. That is why courage matters more than comfort. Because courage says, I may not feel ready, but I will not shrink from responsibility. There are people waiting on your leadership who may never call it that. Your children may need it. Your spouse may need it. Your community may need it. Your nation may need it. Your own soul may need it. And if you keep postponing your purpose until fear disappears, you may spend your whole life standing at the edge of the very destiny you were meant to walk into. Faith says, step anyway. That is the freeing power of faith. Leadership starts with self-government. Before a person can lead others well, they must first learn to lead themselves. This is where freedom becomes real. Because leadership is not just about bold words. It is about discipline. It is about governing your thoughts, your emotions, your habits, your reactions, your fears, your excuses. Anyone can talk about leadership, but self-government is where true leadership is proven. Ask yourself, can I remain steady under pressure? Can I stay true when others compromise? Can I move with conviction when the crowd hesitates? Can I master myself before trying to influence others? Because the first republic a person must govern is the republic of their own soul. And if you cannot rule your own impulses, the world will rule you. If you cannot discipline your own mind, fear will govern your decisions. If you cannot lead your own spirit, you will always be vulnerable to confusion. But faith gives you the strength to say, I will not be ruled by panic, weakness, or indecision. That is inner liberty. That is self-command. That is leadership. Trust yourself because you were built for burden. Here is something many people never hear enough. You are stronger than the world taught you to believe. You can carry more than you think. You can withstand more than you fear. You can rebuild more than you imagine. Not because life is easy, but because the human spirit was built for burden. Some of the greatest people in history did not become great because life was gentle with them. They became great because they discovered, in the middle of hardship, that they could carry what they once believed would break them. And maybe that is where some of you are today. Maybe life has been heavy. Maybe the burden has been long. Maybe the pressure has been relentless. Maybe the uncertainty has worn you down. And maybe somewhere along the way, you began to wonder if you still had what it takes. Hear this clearly today. Yes, you do. You still have strength. You still have purpose. You still have wisdom. You still have fire. You still have leadership in you. And faith is the force that reminds you of who you are when fear tries to make you forget. The cost of refusing your own leadership. There's a cost to not trusting yourself. A very real cost. When a person refuses to lead their own life, they often become trapped in endless second-guessing, dependency on approval, paralysis in decision-making, resentment towards stronger people, regret over roads never taken. And over time, that becomes a prison, because the pain of making a difficult decision is often less than the pain of spending years avoiding it. Some people are not suffering because they chose wrong. Some are suffering because they refuse to choose at all. And indecision, when prolonged, becomes surrender. So today is a call to break that cycle. Not by pretending you will never make mistakes. You will. Not by believing you will never stumble. You will. But by understanding this. A free person is not someone who never falls. That a free person is someone who is willing to stand back up and continue leading. That is strength. That is maturity. That is faith. Faith that frees also calls you higher. Trusting yourself to lead does not mean settling for who you are right now. It means believing you are responsible for becoming more. Faith does not merely comfort you. Faith calls you upward. It calls you into greater courage, greater discipline, greater honesty, greater responsibility, greater service, greater integrity. Because true freedom is not the freedom to do whatever is easiest. It is the freedom to become what is highest. And the strongest leaders are not those who dominate others. They are those who master themselves and serve something greater than comfort. So if you're going to trust yourself to lead, then lead yourself toward honor. Lead yourself toward truth. Lead yourself toward strength. Lead yourself toward conviction. Lead yourself toward duty. That is faith at its finest. Not soft, not weak, not passive, but liberating, upright, and alive. Rise into your own authority. So today, let this message settle deep in your spirit. You do not need permission to become responsible. You do not need applause to become courageous. You do not need perfect certainty to begin moving. You do not need universal agreement to stand in truth. What you need is faith. Faith in the calling placed within you. Faith in the lessons carved into you. Faith in the strength developed through your trials. Faith in the moral responsibility to lead your life with courage. And so today, I say to every hesitant heart, trust yourself to lead. Lead your home. Lead your choices. Lead your mind. Lead your spirit. Lead your future. Stand upright in your conscience. Walk boldly in your responsibility. And do not shrink from the burden of becoming who you were meant to be. Because faith that frees is not the faith that keeps you small. It is the faith that teaches you to stand. And once a person learns to stand inwardly free, they become very difficult to enslave. Faith that frees is the courage to trust that what was placed within you is enough to take the next step and to lead with honor when the moment calls.